Well, folks, it has come to this, a Game 5 and an elimination situation for the Philadelphia 76ers as they try to stay alive and keep their season afloat. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Basketball Pregame Show, Playoff Edition 2024. Answering the bell, maybe. Presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. Rich Hofmann, Devon Givens, Brianna, all of you in the chat. I see Gene right away. He's ready to go. Are you ready to go? More importantly, are the Philadelphia 76ers ready to go? It looks like with some questionable lineup marks there next to their name, Joel Embiid, Kelly Oubre. Earlier in the day on the injury report, as we begin with the injury report, they were there earlier in the day. Some questions as to if they will play. Joel Embiid, migraine, Kelly Oubre, illness. The Sixers released their starting lineup. Both of them are in the usual starting lineup with Tobias Harris, Kyle Lowry, and Tyrese Maxey. So, Rich, we'll start there with you, man. Again, Game 5, trying to stay alive. Normal starting five out there for the Philadelphia 76ers. They were not winning this game if Joel Embiid was not playing today.
No, and I will say, man, more than anything, I am just so happy that we are 25 minutes away from game time here. Because, you know, when Embiid, it gets announced that he's not at shoot-around, Oubre is not at shoot-around, the takes just start flying. And I get it. Like, if they lose tonight,
yes,
we will probably like preview the offseason in some ways, right? That is what happens. They are not out of it yet, though. And I think one of two things will happen here. Either they will lose and we will have that type of show afterwards, or they will win. And I hope those people feel stupid after, because there's still a series going on, a series where the Sixers are getting outscored by 4 points right now. So good to see Joel in the lineup. I guess we're going to learn how important shoot around is. Frankly, man, I don't think it's that important.
Doesn't matter to me either. I saw so many people calling him out about not being a leader and being at shoot-around. Well, guess what? You know, Tyrese Maxey missed shoot-around, also went out there and dropped 35 in a flu game that
Quite
they should have won.
a week ago.
Right.
A week ago.
Yeah. Exactly. So doesn't matter. And the Kelly Oubre piece, illness, sometimes with him, it's so up and down, the nature of what you're going to get from Kelly Oubre, especially in this spot where we saw him play better at home. Game 3, 15 points. Game 4, 19 points. On the road, he has struggled to put the ball into the basket. And I hope for the Sixers' sake and for Sixer fans out there that that's not going to be something that is keeping him from being the same type of offensive player that we saw back here in Philadelphia.
Kelly's a guy that just needs a nap every once in a while.
Why not?
I don't think that's a bad thing, you know. Settle down, Kelly. That's fine. Frankly, I kind of rewatched the game from the other day. I thought he played a little bit better than I thought. Just some key mistakes in key spots. We were pretty hard on him on the postgame show. Some of those fouls on jump shooters, it was those two. He fouled Brunson and McBride on jump shots.
McBride on a three-pointer.
Yeah, those were pretty rough. But anyway, good to have Kelly in the lineup. I'm sure he will see a lot of Jalen Brunson. So Nick Nurse said something along the lines of, he got asked, are there going to be any drastic lineup changes in this game? And he said, I believe it was something like, I wouldn't say drastic, but there will be changes for sure. But he said
probably.
So put your money on it. What do you think we're seeing?
I think right now you're looking at, number one, something that Kyle and Derek talked about when we spoke with them, that it may not necessarily come first. I'll go here first. It may not necessarily be going deeper into the bench, but more so when you're adjusting the Joel Embiid-less lineups, that you do something a little bit different there. Like Derek highlighted Kyle Lowry needing to stay on the floor to help Tyrese Maxey get better shots instead of trying to have your initiators for Tyrese Maxey be Oubre and Tobias Harris.
That was a good point.
So is that something that we'll see there first with Kyle Lowry? And then secondly, I wonder, because we've talked about it so much, the campaign thing, which we already thought should have been done, does he bring Buddy Hield back in the spot where he tries to get him going to see if he can knock down a shot or two to get him loose? Or does he go in the direction where we've talked about, maybe going a little bit deeper into the bench, and that being Ricky Council IV and or KJ Martin at some point to bring some physicality and some energy, because one of the things that we've seen throughout this series, Rich, as why you mentioned, they are only a -4 through the 4 games.
It's crazy.
That right now they're facing this elimination situation tonight. But the game has been physical, and some of them have been being moved off of their spots, one of which I'll say this one, quite honestly, Tobias Harris has been one that has been moved around a little bit too much for some smaller people defending him, where that has been a detriment to this basketball team. So does he look to go somewhere else with a little more physicality to help out in that way, where it's more defensive related and rebounding more than it is on the offensive side? If those guys get something, or some loose ball change, as we know our buddy Marco like to say, some loose ball change there, if they get something like that, that's them effort and work, because that's where they have been losing these games, out hustled, out toughed. And will that show itself in this series by them going a little bit deeper into their bench for those reasons?
And I think like the two guys you brought up there, Buddy and Ricky, right? I think that it provides an interesting stylistic choice for Nick Nurse, because it's like you said, these games have been in the mud the entire time. And at the end of these games, like, we can say toughness, and I know some people push back, oh, it was because of the offense at the end, but they are the physically tougher, fresher team. Like, I think that is, whether we talk about, the Sixers level of grit or if they're just old, they certainly are kind of more athletic, more rugged, and they're tougher. And at the end of games, they're fresher. So do you go with Ricky to try and match that, or do you go with Buddy to try and juice the offense to prevent one of those games? And that's, I truthfully don't know what the answer is right now. I mean, I think I'd probably rather see Ricky, maybe hope he lucks into a 3 or 2, so maybe you get the best of both worlds, because we know, Buddy got a couple stops on Brunson in game 2, but I don't really think he's adding that much to the rebounding, especially the rebounding, or the defense. So, I kind of walk into this game, Devon, and I kind of think I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves with the predictions, but to me, I wouldn't be surprised if it's either Sixers big, like Sixers just, they get out in front. Maybe the non-Embiid minutes are a little bit better. Big fella just, pulls one out from deep inside of him, and they kind of just cruise to a win. Not cruise, but, they're up 10-15 in the whole game. Brunson struggles. If the game is close, though, I'm worried, because the whole thing is, can Joel stay fresh, right? The offensive struggles the other day, and I talked about how disappointed I was in not getting that 2-man game with Maxey at the end of the game. The reason they didn't get it was that Joel was gassed. Like, he physically was given everything he had, but really he was just kind of standing around the rim on defense.
Yes.
And he did not have the energy to play against the small ball lineup, which if he did have the energy to do it, he could have bullied them, right? He could have gotten deep post catches against OG. I've seen that in the playoffs before in 2022. So the whole thing is, can they keep him fresh for the entire game? And also, it would be nice, too, if just like, maybe at the end of the game doesn't matter quite as much. Maybe if when you're up by 10 points in the third quarter, you don't start throwing the ball all over the court, and maybe you can just win that game, give Joel a rest, and let him close it out, you know, up double digits. So that's kind of my feeling right now.
Yeah, and let's get to the keys to the game here now. As you talk about Joel Embiid, he is, of course, the key because of his health. But the other part of it has to go with their closing, their in-game strategy, their in-game execution. I was watching the Oklahoma City game last night, Rich, and everyone else out there, of course, in the chat, and Bree, of course, here producing. But I was watching the game last night, and there was a play towards the end where OKC was, of course, against the Pelicans. The Pelicans kept it close. It was at one point it was a 2-point game, and all of a sudden the Oklahoma City Thunder going like a 12-2 run to put the game out of reach. But with it, there was a play down the stretch after a made Pelicans basket where I believe it was Lou Dort who had the ball under the baseline. It was similar to the play that we saw in game 2 where Kyle Lowry had it as well. Retreated from the left side, ran to the right side, and Lou Dort did the exact same thing that Kyle Lowry did, Rich, where he made a nice soft pass to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Jalen Williams, whichever player it was. I can't remember which of the two it was, but they caught it, they squeezed it, they got fouled. And as a result, it just made me think back and just scratch my head again as to how that happened against the 76ers, where, again, while Lowry probably should have called a timeout at 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, bang, call a timeout, he did, again, still give Tyrese Maxey an opportunity to catch it because it was soft. We know Brunson took away his normal reach for it because he was being pulled by his jersey. And then the other part on the other side, Batum and Harris were just standing next to each other, lock arms instead of running towards the basketball. I also thought Embiid was an option, as we talked about that night, right there, right not under the basket, but about 10 feet away from the rim. And it just made me think about how close this series has been. And when you bring up the 4 points, that's how close it has been. It has been inches for this. And when you speak about the end-of-game execution and Embiid's lack of his ability to move because he's so tired.
He's dead at the end of these games.
You need someone else to execute down the stretch. And the Knicks have figured out a way to execute down the stretch. Not only have they been doing that, when you speak about being fresh as a team, Preston Sachua came in when they needed him because there was no Mitchell Robinson with Isaiah Hartenstein in foul trouble. He was in foul trouble, but he played so well in that final quarter that Thibodeau didn't even put him back in because he was ready for the moment. Yeah. Will someone else be ready for the moment if it's a normal minute exchange for Joel Embiid in this Nick Nurse substitution pattern where he can go the full 12 in the first? He can sit for the first 4 or 5 in the second.
I would like to see him sit like 5 or 6 in the second.
And the same thing for the third. Can he adjust that a little bit just to give him a breather? Because maybe he goes gas pedal and Embiid does in that third where they do extend the double digits. And he does need to take a breather.
Maybe get him out early.
Get him out early and then have the luxury of that. And then the guys come through in the end, like Preston Sachua helping out, like McBride helping out, and your others certainly, as they have been doing all series, closing the game out and finishing the game much stronger than you. So all of that I just laid out. There's not one thing for me there in our keys to the game. That's a lot, but I think there have been so many things for it where the execution, the rebounding, and all the little intangibles in the fourth quarter. You mentioned, Rich, that they're only trailing by 4 in this series. You know how much they lost that fourth quarter by? 4.
Yeah, man.
20-16. Out-rebounded, though, again, heavily in that game. And once again, second chance points, a big factor for the New York Knicks in that one. So those are some of the keys to the game for me. Certainly curious of those for you. And Rich, what are some other ones for you outside of Joel Embiid?
So one stat I would say, too, that is, I think part of the reason that while the Sixers are struggling rebounding and struggling shooting, something that is keeping them in these games, actually, it is Joel Embiid and how they have protected the rim. The Knicks are shooting 54% at the rim in this series. That is the second lowest number. That's low. Like, when you're shooting around the rim, you should be shooting 65% around the rim. And they are trying Joel Embiid more and more as this series has gone along. But even as he's hurt, even as he's gassed, he still has enough to affect those shots. So that is something that you have going for you moving forward in this game. And I really just think it boils down to, like, can he be fresher in the fourth quarter? Like, can he not be completely running on fumes? And again, I'm not even saying this is all his fault. Like, that playing him in the fourth quarter, I'm not going to say, like, we were completely against it live because we understood how bad the non-Embiid minutes have been, but it was a disaster.
It was.
You played him the whole fourth quarter, but you ruined the other 8 minutes you would have had from him, where maybe he would have been a little bit fresher. Now, frankly, he has faded at the end of all of these games. Game 1 and game 2. Game 3 actually was pretty good down the stretch. He had
50. So he kept going.
Yeah, he had some weird bounce at the end of it, which was strange.
Yeah.
They need to have that guy in the second half. And look, it's like we've seen it. Even as they completely screwed up the inbound, and that wasn't his fault. Like, they didn't get the defensive rebound at the end on Hartenstein in game 2. It wasn't just Joel's fault, but you need him to. Again, I think the rebounding and the lack of offensive execution, it all comes back to him not being 100%. Like, you need him to be bossing the paint, man.
Yep.
You need him to be tossing guys around, being the meanest dude in the paint, and he just does not have the energy to do it. So I have no idea how they actually summon the energy. Here's, Devon, like, this is like, we're going to talk about, like, the execution, and maybe they go to Ricky, and maybe they get Maxey more on the ball in those sets. Can they just make more threes in this game? Like, can we just have a Mickey Mouse three-point shooting game where Nico Batum and Kyle Lowry make the threes and they shoot 45% from
like the third quarter from game 3,
right?
Where they made 9 of 12 and he made 4 in a row.
And that is what matters. I think one other thing I would like to see too, even though he did not play all that well last game, I want to just see more Batum and less Harris, personally.
Maybe that's a lineup change that he makes.
I'd want to get Tobias off the floor more. And frankly, too, Tobias, like, you get to play on the bench all the time with Joel out of the game. Like, your numbers are what they are, man. Like 3 or 4 years ago, I get it. You were sacrificing. You were still a good player. That's not what this team is getting right now. Like, you have the opportunity to actually score
more than enough opportunities.
Totally. I think
part of his problem is too. I think the physicality that they bring towards him, it has been a big issue on the offensive end.
Completely agree. I think Derek had the stat the other day. He's 2 for 8 in the non-Embiid minutes the entire series. I don't know which number's worse. You got to get up more shots.
You got to have 18 shots in those non-Embiid minutes.
Maxey's got 26, and he's got 26. I feel like he's getting denied like crazy in a lot of those minutes too. So,
Batum minutes over Harris, I'm in favor of that.
Totally.
I am.
Just get as much spacing, as much passing on the court as possible. What do you think about how the Knicks defended them at the end of the game, right? Because I think that is interesting. Are they going to go back to OG? I mean, they're definitely going to play Precious again, right?
100%.
When you have a great game, and also Mitch is still a game-time decision. I don't know if they have him. Frankly...
And if you can get away with it, you go with Achua.
Frankly, yeah, if I was the Knicks and they're looking at a long playoff run, just lost Bogdanovich, and that was not a dirty play by Batum, but that's a bummer for him. Out for the series. They're running out of guys right now. And they have to look, they got to win this series, but they also could look and say, like, man, if we get Indiana, like, we have a really good chance of winning that series.
Yes.
But we can't run out of guys. So if Mitch is, like, not 100%, if I were them, I'd actually probably just play Achua and say, Mitch, just take the night off. Let's see if we can get this win. Precious was great. And for the Sixers, they have to do a better job with OG.
Yep. And with the Achua piece, you also pull Embiid away from the basket in this game because he can shoot that three-pointer well enough where it's happened against them before. And if they do extend, that might be something going against the Indiana Pacers where they have to have him match up a little bit more on the perimeter against Miles Turner, who's been shooting a lot of threes in this series against the Bucks. So
whoever wins this series, that's going to be a culture shock next series for them.
You're talking about fatigue.
It's going to be a culture shock for the Pacers too in terms of the physicality they're going to deal with. But both of those teams, I feel like the first half of round 2, whether it's the Sixers, whether it's the Knicks, I'm assuming Indy's going to get past Milwaukee here. That's going to be like two boxers, like feeling each other out in the first. That's like a Bernard Hopkins first round, just like, well, we're gonna see what each other has. It's gonna be very weird.
No question about it. All right, man. Let's get to our best bets here for this one. Usual starting lineup for the Sixers: Embiid, Harris, Oubre, Lowry, and Maxey in the starting 5 for the Sixers. Same for the Knicks. They have their usual starting 5 out there. Best bets right now: the Knicks are a 3.5 home favorite, Rich, against the Philadelphia 76ers for this game 5, an elimination game for the 76ers. So if you're looking at this right now, seems like a Sixers line, honestly. 3.5. What does that tell you?
Well, I think in general, Devon, and I've seen it with the Sixers too. Do you remember one of the weirder games I've ever covered was 2022 first round against the Raptors. Sixers get the first 3. All right, they lose 4 in Toronto. Coming back for a gentleman's sweep, that team has nothing. And they sucked. They lost by 20 points. They had to go back to Toronto. And I do think at some point, like, closing out the series is hard, right? You're going to get...
Not easy.
Look, Joel might be running on fumes. You're going to get whatever he has tonight, right? Like,
he's got to leave it all out there on the floor.
And I do think that is what's going to happen. So it can be hard, right? It's the hardest game to close out.
Good point.
So, yeah, I agree with you. It's funny, though. Just with how this series has gone, I could easily see Knicks win, Sixers cover somehow. Just another heartbreaker, like a 2-point loss, something like that. So my best bet, and I kind of mentioned him earlier, I think he is going to play more in this game. I'm going to go Nico Batum over 5.5 points. That is plus 165. I get it. He could score 0. There's a lot of games where he plays well and scores 0, right? He plays defense. He throws all those good entry passes. He's smart. He'll chip in a few rebounds. I think he makes a couple threes tonight.
Okay.
And, I think, look, Devon, some of the things we saw at the end with Joel, too, like, as uninvolved as he was for most of the fourth quarter, even with him being gassed, when they threw the ball to him in the post, he was getting doubled every time. And I thought he generally was making the right decision. It's kind of like what Kyle said too. Like it wasn't like, Nick Nurse used to double Joe from every angle when he was the Toronto coach. It's like Tibbs, like just doubling from one pass away. It's like, Tyrese Maxey is one pass away. Right. And Maxey missed the damn shot. I mean, that was like a good look.
It's a really good look. He acknowledged that after the game. Should have made that shot.
Yeah, and look, like, was that the only reason the Sixers lost? No, because their offense was crappy.
But they would have taken the lead after that.
It would have been nice on the one good possession they ran where you get your best shooter a wide open look. He knocks that down. So I think Nico Batum, they are selling out to take away Joel. They're going to sell out even more, too, in minutes where Anunoby is guarding him. Like, they're not going to let Anunoby guard him one-on-one. They are going to bring help, especially if Joe plays with, like, any degree of force, if that's, like, a first-half adjustment. Anyway, Nico Batum, 2 threes.
Forced and under control, by the way, for Joel Embiid. All right, I have 2, and then we'll get to our predictions. Tyrese Maxey, not a great game this past game. He was good in game 3 with 25, and they won. Not good in this one with 23 in the loss. I think he'll have a better performance. He's averaging 34 on that garden floor in this spot. So I'm just going to stick with the 25.5 and go over that number because I do think he will eclipse that. And I also think this guy plays big in big spots. He's been there before. He's won a championship. I'm going Kyle Lowry. Seeing and recognizing the situation, understanding that he might have to do a little bit more offensively in spurts. And I think he'll go over a number of 7.5 in this one. Maybe it'll be 2 3-pointers. Maybe he gets to the free throw line. Something in that range. He's been the 3rd most consistent player in this series for the Sixers. I think he'll, in a big game right now where you have to empty your bucket, I think Nick Nurse that's going to be one guy that he trusts in this one, and I'm going to go Kyle Lowry over 7.5 points.
Like that call, and again, when we talk about the Sixers' toughness and things like that, Kyle Lowry is just old. He just can't jump anymore. But I'm not doubting his, toughness. And I love kind of having that guy on this team in this kind of gap year where they're not putting any resources into the team, any long-term resources. The fact that guy can still play just like crafty, gritty, pissing the other team off. I could see it, man.
I think he does that.
And I think the Maxey call is a good one, too, because, frankly, he disappointed me more than anybody in that game. Like, his stats were okay. It was like, what was it, like 21 and
23.
23 and, like, 6 assists or whatever. I thought he was bad.
If he gave you, I said 30 before the game, but if he gave you his 28, they probably win that game.
I thought he was bad. And I think some of it comes down to, like, man, he's got to score, right? I don't want to be on this pod tonight being like, it's a bigger problem than Paul Reed. Tyrese, make some shots and show that it is a bigger problem than Paul Reed. We won't even have to talk about it then,
That's right.
So that would be important.
That's our best bets presented by our good friends from Bet Parks. Again, must be 21 or older. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Get in the zone with Bet Parks Sportsbook app. All right, predictions, Rich. Let's go.
I'm going to hedge. I'm going to say if it's a close game, Knicks are going to win. And if it's a 10-point game, Knicks aren't going to blow the Sixers out tonight. I don't see it. If it's a 10-point game, Sixers are going to win that game. But man, if it's close in the final minutes, I get it. The ball might bounce the Sixers' way tonight, and there is a degree of luck. They are a fresher team at the end of games. And we see that on the boards, kind of with their execution, and most of all with Joel Embiid. So if you want to win the game, get up, build a working margin. It's possible. You've done it, honestly, in 3 of the last 4 games. And you gave it away in game 1. You kept it in game 3. You gave it away in game 4.
Well, I do think it's going to be a close game. And to your point, it's going to be tough, folks. I'm going to say sorry right now. I think the Knicks end the series in a close game, defeating the 76ers. They will compete. It will be close. But I don't think that will change at the end. Sixers falling in the series 4-1. All right, that'll do it for us. That doesn't mean go away because guess what, folks? We do have a watch-along coming up. This pregame show was presented to you, as always, by our good friends from Coors Light. Presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. Everybody hang in there. We're coming right back in about 5 minutes for our watch-along. Game 5. Do they survive? Am I wrong? Is Rich right? Where they can win.
Al, I'll give you the prediction. The Knicks are going to win a close game. That's the prediction. Okay.
All right. So, are we wrong? Are you right? Stick with us as we get ready for our watch along coming up next, right here on PHLY Sixers Podcast.
We all